In this presentation, I'm going to talk about stakeholder engagement in the technology needs assessment process, and in particular talk about why stakeholder engagement is important in TNA, who are the stakeholders, when you should be engaging the stakeholders, and how you should engage the stakeholders. And then finally, I'll say something about further reading about stakeholder engagement. And this will refer to a guide note that we have prepared for stakeholder engagement, and it's available from the TNA website. First of all, why do we need to involve stakeholders in the TNA process? Well, it's clear from the foregoing presentations that TNA is a country-driven process. It covers many technologies and sectors, so a lot of diverse information and opinions need to be gathered. Different individuals and groups are often involved in the use of technologies, and they're affected by them. This expertise and knowledge of specific technologies and the need for these technologies resides in a broad spectrum of individuals and groups, and we need to harvest this wealth of information by involving these individuals and institutions in the TNA process. This need for engaging stakeholders can be justified by two conditions. One is that the stakeholders provide information to the process, especially nationally specific information. And then secondly, the involvement of stakeholders throughout the TNA process helps to ensure national ownership of the TNA process. But different stakeholders can have very different opinions and information about technologies. They have different perceptions of the same problem or issue, different priorities regarding the technology and how they can be used and how the technologies affect them. Different stakeholders have different opinions, different informations, different expectations regarding the technologies. And it's important to take these different perceptions and information into account. Here, for example, is a situation with a simple solar cooker technology, which is being demonstrated by a technology provider to a representative from the Department of Energy, to an academic researcher, and to representatives of the orphanage where this technology is being demonstrated. It's clear that each of these stakeholders will have a different expectation, different amount of information, and different opinion of the technology. So who are the stakeholders? How do we identify and characterize the stakeholders that we should be engaging in the TNA process? Well, people or representatives of institutions that are connected with the specific technologies are vital to include in the process of TNA. These can be people who are connected with the technologies in some way, who are involved in producing, selling, or using the technologies, for planning or legislating for the technologies, or connected to those affected by the climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts. It's important to identify the stakeholders at an early stage in the process. It's important to take into account and consider when the different stakeholders should be involved in the process. And this involvement in the TNA process is specific to the three steps of the TNA process. So when should we engage stakeholders in the TNA? The three steps of the TNA require different kinds of information, and they need to involve different groups. Step one, we need information on the relevant technologies. Information from anybody who's already using these technologies, like government entities involved in technology development, climate change experts, etc. People who know about the technologies can help to fill in the details in the fact sheets and provide qualified input to the prioritization from their different vantage points and areas of expertise and experience. In step 2, here we are interested in building up a picture of the barriers that prevent or hinder the specific technologies from coming into the market at a large scale. We want to bring in stakeholders who could be affected by the technologies, who could oppose or support the technologies, and who could stand to gain or lose from this technology, who may have influence and who may be needed to reduce or eliminate the barriers. We need to get an understanding of how such technologies have been implemented, so that we need to engage stakeholders who have experience in implementing technologies and thus overcoming barriers, and ask the question, what does it take to get this technology to penetrate in the country? Finally, in step 3, the final stage of the process, we need to bring in government entities, people working in ministries who are involved in setting goals and policies, and not least investment experience from both public and private and financial institutions and technology providers and the beneficiaries, in order to develop realistic technology action plans for implementing the findings of step 2 in a realistic technology action plan which can be integrated with the climate change policy of the country. Now, examples of the types of stakeholders that could be involved in these 3 stages are, for example, in step 1, stakeholders who can provide information on the relevant technologies in these prioritized sectors, to fill in the fact sheets with relevant national detail, and to contribute to the prioritization process, also ensuring that the technologies chosen are in line with the existing national sustainable development and climate change policy. In step 2, most of the same stakeholders may also be involved, but now the range of stakeholders is widened, bringing in stakeholders who can contribute meaningful information about implementation barriers and how these can be overcome using various measures, incentives, legislation, etc. In step 3, bringing in government entities at a higher level, decision makers and advisors, to assist in transforming the proposed enabling environment initiatives from step 2 into an implementable technology action plan. And this stage will also focus on implementation of the technologies, so it's essential also to involve the financial sector, private investors and technology developers. There's more information on this in the guide note. How to engage stakeholders. There are many ways to engage stakeholders. For example, questionnaires and surveys, interviews, field observation, workshops, focus groups, brainstorming, and public fora. And most of you will have experience in some or even most of these methodologies, approaches for stakeholder engagement. I'll just run through a few of them and how they can be useful in the various stages of the TNA process. Questionnaires and surveys can be probably most useful in step 1, in obtaining and confirming information from large groups of stakeholders. Interviews, these could be very useful in step 2, when a high priority is to get information on barriers in specific cases as experienced by different people. Workshops, focus groups, brainstorming are probably useful and essential in all steps 1, 2 and 3. Public fora are useful both at the beginning and the end of the process, where the TNA can be communicated to a large audience and public concerns can be raised and aired and addressed. Now, stakeholder engagement is a vast subject, and there's plenty of literature that you can consult for more details. In the guide note that we've prepared for TNA, it's available online. You can find further discussions like best practices for stakeholder consultation, keeping the stakeholders engaged through the process, and the role of the stakeholders even after TNA completion. You can also read about lessons that we have learned from the first implementation of the TNA, the so-called TNA Phase 1. And, as I said before, references for further reading about stakeholder engagement. In conclusion, I have mentioned the importance of identifying and utilizing stakeholders in the TNA process. Through stakeholder engagement, the TNA team can harvest valuable and, in fact, key information about the technologies and the options that are available in the country. It's important to keep the stakeholders well informed throughout the process, and this will maximize the national ownership and the relevance of the TNA. And that concludes the presentation about stakeholder engagement.